Now the easy way to install the handlebars is to put the brackets on the bar, the upper and lower, and then put them into the top plate, and the studs that are on the uppers, they'll go through and the bar will just hang there, and then you can tighten up the nuts and the washers from the bottom. So that's a simple way to do that. Now this is the hardware for mounting the ignition switch on the R80ST. There's a thick ring and a nut, and then the plate that shows the position of the ignition switch, and then a top ring that secures the plate onto the ignition switch. Now the switch mounts with that big washer, if you will, or spacer, underneath the bracket, and then the nut goes on the top of the bracket. Now there's a tab in the top of the headlight bracket that catches one of the slots in the ignition switch, and there's actually two slots, so you could mount the switch 180 degrees different. But the trick is to take one of the keys that has the fold-up style, and I don't have one of those for the ST, so I'm going to use the one for my 83 RS, and this tab is the pointer to the positions on the nameplate that shows on, off, and park. So that's how it should go in. And another way to view it is the teeth of the key should point down. So here's how that little tab on the end of the fold-up key acts as a pointer when I get the nameplate on. So that'll be off, that'll be park, and that'll be on. So that's the right way to orient the ignition switch on the tab in the top of the headlight bracket. Now the wires come down through a second hole in the bottom of the bracket and go off to the side. And this wire is the one for an optional voltmeter, which I don't have, so it'll just be sitting free. Now the speedometer and tach have a bracket on the side with two studs, and they mount up at the top of the headlight bracket using some M5 nuts and washers. So the speedometer and tachometer are mounted on the bracket, and now it's time to fit the instrument housing over them and the ignition switch. After I mounted both instruments, I pushed the dash down on top, and then I installed the little nameplate here that shows the ignition switch positions. It's got two tabs that fit on either side of the ignition switch slot, and then this top ring just screws down like that to secure everything. So that's how the dash gets mounted onto the instrument cluster and to the bracket for the headlights. Now to tighten up that center ring, I put a nail in each of the two holes, and then I put a screwdriver between them and just twist around, and it'll tighten up that center ring until it's snug. Now at the moment I don't have one of the fold-over keys for the R80ST, so the key itself tends to line up with on when it's off, because if you recall, the fold-up key had its little pointer at about 90 degrees to the face of the key. So I'm hoping I'll be able to find a folding key that I can use for the ignition key, but it doesn't matter. It all works, so that's the most important part. Now on the back side of the dash are the bulb sockets for the turn signal indicators, and these are the longer wires that go on them, and I just verify that the blue wire has a blue-black on the right side and a blue-red on the left side, which means as I face the front of the bike, this is the right and this is the left. So as you can see here, the way the pins are set up, this is the center and this is the edge. So this will be brown and this will be the blue-red for the left side indicator bulb, and similarly for the right side. So the way I have my sockets oriented, the two blue wires are next to each other on the inside, and the brown ground wires are on the outside. Now there's a bracket on each side of the dash, and that's where the bottom cover is going to mount, and a couple of screws hold that on. So there's a bolt with a grommet, a screw with a grommet that goes into that bracket. So that's how I get the bottom attached to the top on both sides. So the bottom cover is mounted onto the top instrument panel on the dash. So these are the new handlebar controls. This is the right one, which ends up with the choke and the clutch, and the left one ends up with the front brake master cylinder and the throttle. And this is the end of the throttle tube with the notched gear on it. So I'm going to install these on the new handlebars. Now the throttle twist grip has a set of teeth cut into it, which fits into a cam that's inside the housing, and there's also a slot here. Now the housing has a foot, and that's what fits in that slot and keeps the handlebar gear captive. And I'll install the cam and the cable when I install all the carburetor cabling at a later time. But for now, I'm just going to slide in the handlebar twist grip and put the cover on to capture it. And then this is the little cover bolt that goes in here, and I'll tighten that up just so everything's all together in one place. Now to mount the handlebar control unit on the handlebar, there's a hole here and a little Allen bolt that goes in, and it pinches it tight on the handlebar. However, this is the newer style of handlebar control, and on the old style there always was a little tiny serrated triangular piece that would fit right inside there and grab the handlebar tube. However, on the newer version, you don't need those anymore. It clamps tight just the way it is. Now on the right handlebar control, there's a threaded hole here for the front brake light switch, and the one I got from Euromoto Electrics comes with a little washer, but you don't use that on these handlebars. And all it does is just screws right in. A little bit of finagling here. There we go. So it screws in. And then on the back are two terminals, spade terminals, and they connect onto the front brake light subharness. So the spades just slide right on to the pins, like that. And then there's a little rubber cap that slides over, and that keeps the water out of the front brake light switch, and it connects up over the housing here on the switch, like that. And then, like I did on the clutch, I routed the cable back here around the spine tube, and then down this way, and then back out here, and then I'll plug these two in. Now before I install the handlebar bracket, this is the clutch switch, and it was a little wide, so I kind of had to sand the plastic down a little bit. And there's a hole here for the plunger, and then a tiny M3 screw hole. So I'm just going to put that in and run in a screw to hold it, and then when I mount it, I won't have to fiddle with all that. So there's the little screw that holds the foot on the end of the clutch switch. So I've got that installed now. Now I just slid the left bracket onto the end of the handlebar, and I'm pushed it down pretty much all the way as far as it'll go. So I've got enough room to mount the handlebar grip. So that's about right. There's plenty of tube left for the handlebar grip to slide on. Now on the top here is a large bolt, and that gets this cover indicating which position you have the choke in for starting or running. And I'll install all that when I install the choke cable. Now I routed the clutch switch wire down inside, and it's going to run just behind the steering stem. Then it comes out. I'm going to route it over here on the top of where the lock is, and then through this slot here, and then down to this side where I can plug it in then with the plug on the end of the main wire harness. So I tightened up the Allen bolt, and that keeps the handlebar assembly from rotating. Now I mounted the mirrors, and they mount through this hole, and then there's a lock nut here to secure them. And that's kind of how everything looks at the moment. Now the trick to getting this handlebar grip on the tube, I spray a little bit of tire mounting compound just to lubricate it, but you can use just a little bit of water and a dash of dish soap. Either way, it'll go on, and then it'll set up and stay solid, and it won't twist. Now on the bottom of the handlebar assembly, there's a little hole right there, and that's where the bolt goes in for the multifunction control to mount to the handlebar assembly. So it has a little tab on the top and slides in, and then I'll tighten up that Allen bolt at the bottom to secure it. So the left multifunction switch is installed, and little bolt is down here, and likewise the right one. So I have the handlebars and the instrument and dash all mounted now. So I'm going to test the electrical system. I'm going to turn it to park, and the instrument light's on, front park light's on, and the rear park light is on. Now I'm going to turn it to on. The dash lights are lit, as they should be. Front headlights on. Now let's check the high beam. That's the flash, and that's the full. So that's working. Turn signals are clicking on the right side, and they're clicking on the left side. They're working. Let's try the horn. Yep, that's working. So everything's just fine.